Welcome to Black Expat Stories, the show where we dive deep into the experiences of Black people across the diaspora who have boldly decided to immigrate abroad in search of a better life. I'm your host, Courtney Bowden, and I'm a Black American writer who also took the leap of faith and moved overseas. What if travel could be a form of resistance, a way to reclaim your joy, your history, and your connection to Blackness across the globe? Meet Diva Green. She's a cultural curator and destination storyteller whose platform, I Got Your Black, is changing the way we move through the world. Featured in Essence and named Creator of the Year by the Black Travel Summit, Diva is on a mission to expose travelers to the beauty and brilliance of Afro-Indigenous communities around the world. Through her viral videos and in-depth storytelling, she's reaching tens of thousands across Instagram and TikTok, using travel as a tool for cultural connection and diasporic solidarity. In this episode, Diva opens up about the personal reckoning that led her here, how bearing witness to systemic violence in the U.S. pushed her to use storytelling and travel as instruments of healing and activism. We also talk about the 6 months she spent living in an Afro-Mexican town, what she saw, what she unlearned, and the powerful lessons she's still carrying with her today. Now, back in the U.S., Diva reflects on the emotional weight of returning home, her take on the growing Blaxit movement, and what it truly means to create experiences that honor culture without extracting from it. So, if you care about traveling consciously, about migrating mindfully, about building real connections across the diaspora, and about showing up in the world as a deliberate and thoughtful global citizen, keep watching. Here's my conversation with Diva Green. Hey, Diva. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Courtney. I am doing so good. Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we're finally getting the chance to have this conversation. We've also had many great conversations off the record. So really excited to dig in. Do you remember how we first met? We met at a barbershop. You remember that right here in Playa del Carmen?
Right in fly. I think that's when I first got there, maybe like a week in, if that, 2 weeks.
Okay. And I think I had maybe been here a few weeks or a month or what have you. And then we just clicked. And ever since then, I have been watching you make such a powerful impact with your I Got Your Black platform, which is why I really wanted to have a conversation with you today. So let's talk about it. What inspired you to create I Got Your Black? And I love that name, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Part of what inspired it, definitely the name, it was very much a serendipitous moment. So, how do I make it short? Essentially, it is I'm in college and I'm in this period where I'm like learning all about systemic racism because I'd known about like interpersonal, people on people kind of things, but I didn't really understand that racism could make you die in a hospital when you give birth or make it so that maybe you don't get talking about not getting a certain job because of your name and things like that, Diva and all that. But outside of that, I didn't get how deeply entrenched it was. And I was upset. When I tell you I was like enraged and just deeply saddened. And so I decide in my naivete to go to Europe. I said, okay, I got this accident money. I had this car accident. Money finally came through. I'm like, I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to take this money that I got and I'm going by myself. Nobody got to come with me. I'm out. And so I go to Budapest, I go to Barcelona, I go to Milan, Rome, just like a whole bunch of different places, right? And while I'm there, I noticed a couple of things. The only time that I saw Black people, with the exception of this one girl who was mixed race and this other girl, was when I saw people in positions of service. While I was in Paris, I had this moment, people were asking where I was staying. And I was staying in an area called Gare du Nord. It's next to this really huge monument that's really popular. So when people were telling me I was in the hood, I was like, I'm in the hood? Okay. I'm confused by that because I'm from Brooklyn. So this one was like the hood to me, but okay, let's keep it going. And so on the last day of being in Paris, I decided to walk around the more immediate parts of the neighborhood. I had been really sick, so I didn't have a lot of time to really explore Paris outside like the Eiffel Tower. I probably had 2 days out of 10 because I was sick. Anyway, I go walking around maybe 10 blocks from the place I was staying at, and I walk into what I could only describe as being from Brooklyn, Pickens Avenue or 125th Street, Harlem. Like, it's vendors everywhere. It's full of people. Commerce is happening.
I love 125th Street in Harlem. That's where I get my body oils from.
Listen, okay, like the shea butters, all the things. Yes. Literally got me some shea butter. But yeah, so I'm seeing this and I'm like, whoa, okay, why did I know this existed? Where did this come from? What is happening here? This is absolutely incredible. And that's when it dawned on me. This is why people were telling you that I was in the hood. They were describing this very Black neighborhood as being in the ghetto. And so I was like, okay, that I hear you. The other time I saw people, Black people, was when I was in Barcelona. And these were vendors running from the police. So that was a big part of my experience, or not a big part, but this is something that I noticed in my experience. It wasn't like what shaped it. It was an incredible summer. I had a great time, self-exploration. But I came back, and in the airport, before I even get picked up, I see on the TV screen and trigger warning here, Mike Brown. I learn about the death of Mike Brown, his murder. And so I'm like, dang, I just got back. I turned up my New York Times app while I was going, like, why am I seeing this the moment I get back? No break.
Okay? Right when you land, tragedy.
Seriously, exactly. And so I'm feeling like, you know, when you get post vacation blues, like you get kind of sad because you're on the trip. No, this was something different. I was depressed. I was like, I cannot be here. This is horrible. The best way I could describe it is a friend said it felt like the volume of my life was like all the way up and it got turned down. And I was like, this is horrible.
So it was almost as if you came back from that experience and the scales fell from your eyes. Like it sounds like you saw things with a fresh perspective.
Absolutely. It was fresh, but it was also like saying more of the stuff that I was running from. And not that like Europe was the best place to run from it. It just was what I was doing at the time, like being thoughtful about what I was consuming and things like that. But anyway, to wrap it up, fast forward to 2014, I'm in this art studio with some friends, and this is the night where in New York City, or the world learns that Eric Garner is not going to be justified, or like he's not going to, the man that murdered him will be acquitted. And so people are taking to the streets, they protest, and they got the signs up, blocking traffic, Brooklyn Bridge shut down, all the things. And Diva Green is an art studio. And I'm like, Harriet would have left me because I am. Outside. Like she would have shot me or left me because I'm supposed to be outside protesting. I'm feeling crazy guilty, right? And so I draw this fist that looks like the Black Power fist, right? And I mix it with this design that comes from Panama called Mola. My family's from Panama, and so I infuse it. My friend Steve, what's that? And I was like, even though I necessarily grew up in an African American household, I am first generation, and my experience is when I see these things, I feel that same level of sadness. And so this is kind of solidarity. And so I was like, it's like me saying I got your back. And then I was like, I got your back. It was literally this voila moment. I know what I'm going to do. I literally said, I know exactly what I want to do with my life. It was actually a moment. I'm going to use travel as my form of activism. I cannot be out on these streets. That is not for me. Like, I would be hearing about things that would happen and be on my couch crying, missing class. Like, I'm in college, like, just terrible. And I'm like, I can use travel. I can go back to this beautiful life of exploring and still find a way to support the diaspora around the world.
That's beautiful how you were able to alchemize your anger, right? And your rage. I think that sometimes when we witness things like the Mike Brown tragedy, Eric Garner, the list can go on. It's easy to fall into despair, but it seems like you were empowered in that moment to do something. And what I love about that is to do something within your wheelhouse, within your interests. And it's interesting how you were like, oh, Harriet would have left me, and just using that as your fuel to make a difference. So you had this experience in Europe and this awakening once you landed back in the States. And you talked about how you wanted to use travel as part of your activism. And so what gap were you looking to fill in the travel space with I Got Your Black?
Yeah, I think it kind of pinpoints back to that moment in Paris where I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know all these Black people were here. And I know, even though I was sick for most of the time in Paris, I would have gone there sooner and just spend time with the people. And so I really wanted to offer that, create an experience or create opportunities for travelers to be able to find Black communities no matter where they were, but also to learn about these communities in a really thoughtful way. Like with my family being from Panama, I think there's so much that people don't necessarily know about being Panamanian, of African descent, or things like that. And so I wanted to figure out a way to show that to the world and on a global scale.
Yeah. And that's one of the powerful things that I really appreciate about your platform, because it's not just about going to all of these beautiful and very fascinating destinations. It's also about connection. Why do you believe it's so crucial for the entire African diaspora to be intentional about connecting with each other across borders? And how do you see I Got Your Black doing that?
I think the more I travel, the more I see so many moments and so many instances where there are elements of cultures that I've seen in other cultures, right? For instance, going back to Panama, we have these things called Los Diablos, or the Diablos, right? And so the Diablito. And so you'll see these like essentially people dressed up as devils. And it's a big part of like Panamanian culture. And to go and see that in not necessarily the same form, so it doesn't look the same in terms of the dance and things like that, or necessarily the style of dress, but to go and see that they have the devils in Mexico, that was like, wait, what? Like, what is the connection here? I think for me, figuring out what those connections are, whether it's through food and seeing we might mash yam here or mash plantain here and then fry it in another place, and seeing how vast we are and how we've done so much with what we have. I think that's the dream for me. A guest came on a trip and she was like, I'm leaving here just realizing how connected we are. And I literally cried. I was like, that's the goal.
Yeah. And you mentioned a trip. We're going to talk a bit about your Afro-Mexican immersion experiences. But first, I want to talk about your approach to storytelling because it's so intentional. Every time something from I Got Your Black scrolls across my feed, I learn something. I want to pause. I want to watch the entire thing. And I know that is not by happenstance. How do you approach curating all of these stories, and what kind of impact do you want to have by sharing them?
I didn't realize, to be honest with you, how educational these videos were until I consistently got that comment. I think for me, the biggest thing was to just show each culture in a way that felt intentional. So when I go to these places, I don't go and be like, hey, this is what I read about this, or this is what I really try to learn from the community. So whether it's a meal that I learn how to prepare, if I tasted something that tastes really good, I promise you I am going in somebody's tia, somebody, uncle, somebody. They're going to teach me how to make this and explain to me where this dish comes from. I truly try to be intentional. I think that's what people are seeing on camera more than anything, is that not only am I showing my perspective, because I can only do that, right? Show my perspective of this community, but I'm showing the way that I intentionally connect with them so that I could share what I hope to be a well-rounded perspective. Because I can't tell somebody here, Afro-Mexican, but I can tell you my perspective, and I can only try to do it in a way that is intentional and thoughtful by connecting with the community.
That's important because unfortunately, and I can only speak as an American because that was where I was educated, our educational system fails us when it comes to learning about other cultures in a meaningful, significant way. And I see your content as a great supplement because before I started living abroad, I did not know that there was an entire Afro-Mexican population. And when you mentioned earlier about just the various ways that we connect through food, dance, culture, art, it shows us that we are far more connected than we actually know. And I think that I Got Your Black does a really good job of just helping us see our humanity and parts of our culture that we didn't even know were shared with one another.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. I think that's really what it is for me. I think like what you mentioned about dance and music and things like that. When you go to a place, it's because even me, like my family's from Panama. I know Latin people of African descent exist, but I was still shocked when I was in college and I turned to the page and saw and learned about Afro-Mexicans. I was like, Professor, what you talking about? I had never seen no Black Mexican yet. What you talking about? But it's exciting for me. And I think that there are so many people who will share that excitement, but also who will see themselves in these communities. I think that part of it, when we go back to the activism part, wasn't just to show how connected we are in celebration, which I really try to focus on in the joys and the celebration of that, but also, unfortunately, in some of our oppressive experiences. Like that's just the reality of it. When no matter what place I go to or place that I go to in whatever country, unfortunately, Black people are usually the most marginalized. And I wanted to tell that story in a way that wasn't like poverty porn, as they say, but I wanted to tell a story and tell the stories in a way that wasn't poverty porn, but also really make sure that people are aware that this is not a unique experience. And when we call it out for what it is, that it happens in Western civilizations and everywhere, what can happen as a result of like
Yes.
putting a name to this thing that is a global experience.
Yes. And it's so imperative for us to understand as Black Americans that we're not the only oppressed people in the world. And I also see what you're doing with I Got Your Black and what I'm doing with Black Expat Stories as an effort to unite us together because I believe in the principles of Pan-Africanism. We are people of the global majority. And so what happens when we unite? What happens when we put aside these, in my opinion, a lot of times trivial diaspora wars and truly understand what it looks like to be in solidarity with one another?
As you said, those trivial things, it's intentional to keep folks separated. That is,
Yes.
the system is designed to do that. But like you said, what happens? I think people feel more at home, but also they're able to combat these systems that would otherwise have us combating each other.
Exactly, exactly. Now, we've been talking about the Afro-Mexican population, and that's significant for our conversation today because you didn't just study Afro-Mexican culture from a distance, you live right within it. You spent 6 months in an Afro-Mexican town. What was that experience like for you?
Hey, when I first got to Mexico, my original plan was to go and live there immediately. So, like July 2021, I was like, I'm going to go and live in this town. I'm going to go check it out first. And I did so for my birthday in October. Unfortunately, I realized that the infrastructure, internet, was not going to work for my remote job at the time. And so I was like, I can't live here, but I'm going to come back. And when the time came where I was like not working for a place where I had to clock in and be there at a certain time and be on meetings and calls and whatnot, I was like, I need to go and not just visit this place. At this point, I've been hosting these trips for about a year now. And so I was like, the only way that I can even, one, make this experience better, but feel even more connected to the community is by actually living with the community. I think it was one thing to, go and say, hey, I'm going to organize these trips with permission because I always say, when we started hosting these trips, I asked people, are y'all open to us? Are you open to me bringing people here? Is this just like a plus one invite? Like I got invited by a cousin, or can I invite people and be like one of the organizers invite? Is the barbecue invites in my hand? And yeah, there I was like, honestly, I went because it was the place on our trip that was a last minute ad, by the way. It's called Coyantes, Mexico. And it was a last minute ad for our very first Afro Mexico experience. But people in Jaca and Guerrero was like, you have to go to Coyantes. You think Cuajiniculapa is Black? You need to go to Coyantes. Usually the plan was to take people to places that I've been to like extensively and gone to a bunch of times. But I was like, all right, I'm asked Maida if we can come and see the dance and things like that. And we did, and people were so excited. And so I was like, okay, I need to come live here. To answer your question about what that experience was like, it was the warm hug that I needed. Coyantes was like an embrace in a time of my life where I was dealing with a lot of just like personal, for lack of better words, turmoil. And the community just was like a loving hug, a kiss from your grandma on the cheek, belly filled with the tortilla and all of the caldo, just like it was warm and just what I needed at the time.
Did you know that since the 2024 US presidential election, internet searches for how to move abroad have increased by over 1,000%? Maybe you've been searching too, imagining what life abroad could be like. But while you're searching online, I invite you to also search your heart. Moving abroad is a big decision, and it's important to get clear on what a life of freedom and fulfillment looks like for you. I'm Courtney Bowden, creator and host of Black Expat Stories, and nearly 4 years ago, I moved to Mexico. And without a doubt, living abroad has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. That's why I created something special to guide you, the Blaxit soundtrack and soul work journal. It's my free gift to help you reflect, dream, and plan. With 6 curated playlists and printable journal prompts, it's designed to inspire and ground you, just like music and journaling did for me during my own process. My hope is that it will offer you the same support as you navigate your next steps. They say home is where the heart is, but what if your heart is calling you somewhere else?
Wow, that sounds like it was a profound experience for you, especially during that time in your life. You mentioned these trips, the Afro-Mexican immersion trips that you had been hosting way before you moved to Coyantes. Can you tell us more about what those trips are and why you decided to host them?
The Afro-Mexico experience is essentially an experience designed to have people, travelers come and connect directly with the communities in an authentic and in a meaningful way. So, what do I mean by authentic? It means that the people that are working with us on the tours, they're people who are from the community. They're not outsiders that came, and I'm the outsider in this particular case. I see myself as a conduit and really just like that bridge that connects the communities. And so rather than me going and being like, hey, this is what they do here, this is how this goes, and this is the thing, I really leave it to the community to do the food tours and talk about the food that they eat all the time and grew up eating, to talk about the art that they made, to talk about these spiritual practices that they participate in. And so it's really an opportunity for people to learn about the art, taste the foods, maybe make a little tortilla too, in a way that doesn't feel like, I would say, voyeuristic.
Yeah.
Say the best way to describe it. I really try to be super intentional about it. And throughout this experience, you're seeing the art, you're experiencing the music and trying the foods, but you're also learning about where these people sit in the racial makeup of Mexico, and then on the global scale, how that connects to the diaspora overall.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of my fellow Black expats say they experience less overt racism in places like here in Mexico. And I can say the same thing, versus the United States. But we know that colorism is still a major issue in Latin America. And you mentioned educating folks about where Afro-Mexicans sit in the greater conversation of colorism. So how do you navigate these conversations about race, colorism, and identity? And what do you wish that more folks understood about colorism? Because even though we might come here as Black Americans and not experience it overtly, there's an entire population here that does and suffers because of it.
I think one of the biggest things, and this is, yeah, one of the biggest things is language. Now, I think oftentimes when folks say that they don't experience it, I think it's a language thing. If you don't know that somebody is insulting you, how you going to be offended? To be honest with you. I think that's a part of it. I will also say that I think Black Americans in particular experience a level of privilege, just being American, having the dollars and things like that. So there's a level of privilege that comes with that. But how do I go about investigating it? The interesting about this trip and my experience is that really I was like out there on some, what do they say, sociology, ethnography. Like I was really connecting the dots and doing all the things there. And so I got to speak to a lot of what I would call modern day freedom fighters for the Afro-Mexican people, like people that literally fought to get the name, the title, the identifier Afro-Mexican on the census. During our trip, we sit down with 3 people, and depending on who's available and things like that, we sit down with the people who were literally going to Oaxaca to make sure that this was like, that they could have it on I think it was like a local document, and then on the local constitution, like the state constitution, and then on the larger scale. I think leaving it to the experts to tell me whether racism exists or not is the first thing, which I'm gonna just, for people who don't know, it exists. But that's the main thing, talking directly to the source, because it's easy for a Mexican who's not very dark skinned to say that racism doesn't happen, or that they have various people in their family that may look like me and they don't experience racism. But ask Señorita Juanita if she experiencing it, and she probably gonna tell you something different, especially when people leave the intermediate areas. So if they go outside of Oaxaca or Guerrero, which is where the majority of Afro-Mexican people, and Veracruz. But if they leave that area, it's, oh, shoot, I don't know they exist. Within Mexico, people do not know, like Mexicans themselves, some of them don't know that there are Afro-Mexicans within their own country. I was playing tennis in Playa, and I had somebody from the Norte, from Monterrey, telling me that, oh no, they're like you. They came here. And I'm like, ma'am, These people are not Black from somewhere else. Okay, they came here in the 1500s and they Mexican. That's it. But I know some people.
Wow.
Crazy stories. Like people have been filmed in movies. Like she didn't experience racism until she went to Oaxaca City. That's crazy.
Insane. And that just speaks to the power of erasure, right? Because when you are not part of the conversation, other people have the power to rewrite the narrative. It blew my mind when you told me that Afro-Mexicans weren't officially counted in Mexico's census until 2020. Until 2020, like 5 years ago. So from your experience living in an Afro-Mexican community, speaking with so many Afro-Mexican freedom fighters, what did that moment mean for the Afro-Mexican identity?
I love this question. I think that question is best posed to someone who is of Afro-Mexican descent. But what I would say I interpret is that I think folks feel a level of pride being able to have a way to identify themselves. One, because unfortunately, a lot of this fight for this label was as a result of issues with land. So there were places where the Afro-Mexicans were the people who were there, but they weren't able to claim land because they had no like name or title, or they weren't considered a marginalized group. And so by being able to say, hey, this is a protected group, this is a protected class, and they identify as X, Y, and Z, they were able to then claim what was rightfully theirs. So I think like from a legal perspective, that would be the best way. In terms of like internal, and I would imagine that it comes with a lot of pride. I think more like recently, for the very first time, a group in Coyantes was actually invited to perform at the Guelaguetza, which is like this huge festival that celebrates Oaxaca, has been going on for years, but never included Afro-Mexican people. So I think that's what that change, that tide is turning.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about this tide turning, because we've been seeing Mexico's newest president even declare some things and acknowledge the fact that there were indigenous people here before the Spaniards came. There is an Afro-Mexican population. She even declared 2025 as the year of the indigenous woman. And so you've been facilitating these trips, you've been traveling to these areas, you've even lived there. What does it look like to have all of a sudden all of this acknowledgement of what seems like hidden history, but right here underneath everyone's nose? The fact that you mentioned there are Mexicans that you've encountered who weren't even aware that there were Afro-Mexicans in their own country, it really puts that into some perspective.
Imagine walking into a room and it's just you and, some people, or you're in a room by yourself, right? Let's actually do it like that. And then suddenly this room has 2.5 million people that just appear. I think that's what it's like. These people were sitting there. They didn't walk in through the door, but suddenly all those chairs that were all in that room, they all are filled, and it's 2.5 million people and counting. You asked me earlier about what it means for the community to have this, to be honored and to be acknowledged in this way. The groups that have been fighting for their acknowledgement, they're projecting that more people are going to identify as Afro-Mexican simply because they feel emboldened and proud enough to do so. Even in Mexico, there was this desire to distance yourself away from your Blackness, even though you might look like someone like me, but you distance yourself. I remember when I was doing my research, I asked a girl who was clearly Black Mexican. I was like, this is obvious to me. And she was like, no, but they live over here, And I imagine, she was like, no, I'm not, but they live over here. And I'm like, I imagine hopefully in 5 years, this is 2021 when I first went. But I imagine when they do the next census, that girl might say, sí, soy Afro-Mexicana and proud. I'm Afro-Mexican and proud. So I think it's that awareness, because you were already in the space. You've been eating tamales wrapped in plantain, as I always like to tell people. I'm not saying the tamal came from people of African descent, but that banana leaf that was wrapped around it, that changed the flavor, okay? No.
Almost like we do.
So we can think that anyway.
Sprinkle.
Okay. Yeah, there's just so much there. And I think as we uncover so much, even there's, I don't know what they call them, musicologists, but people that study music. There's some studies that say mariachi music, that call and response comes directly from the Afro-Mexican people. When I think about mariachi, I do not think about Africans of any descent. Okay. So I'm excited to see what people are able to uncover and unfold and unwrap and see what's already there, because the thing is, it's there. We just have to find it.
Absolutely. And when you talk about this 2.5 million people and counting, I also want to have a conversation about what it looks like to be erased, denied, and dismissed in your own country. Just from having conversations with you, I've learned that a lot of Afro-Mexicans don't have access to the resources that other folks living in the country do. So can you talk a little bit about what, and I don't want to generalize, but for the average Afro-Mexican who their identity has been erased and denied, what are those outcomes of being erased? What does that look like here in Mexico?
To put it in context, when you're marginalized, and we want to definitely just acknowledge that the indigenous people of Mexico are marginalized as well. In this particular case, especially when we're talking about Afro-Mexicans, we're often talking about people who are mixed race of Afro and indigenous descent. But these communities, in the case of the indigenous folks, let's say they might, I think it's like a 4% literacy rate. And whereas with Afro-Mexicans, that goes up 2% to 6% of folks who can't read, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the numbers. So like I think it puts things in perspective in that they get the less of the less. Unfortunately, even in this particular case, Black people are more likely to not receive the care they need. When I think about internet access and things like that, like you're going to see less of that in the Afro-Mexican community. So you were trying to have calls with me while I was in Coyantes. That was a nightmare. And they'll tell you. So the thing about it is that online, though, they'll say that everyone has access to internet. And I can tell you for a fact that is not true. Not just because of like infrastructure issues, but also the cost of it. It's not as
prohibitive.
Horrible. Yeah. And even like when you think about things like access to education, like there's less schools. They just made for the very first time, which I'm super excited to talk about this because I actually haven't spoken about this. The very first Afro-Mexican university was inaugurated. I believe this was September or October in Mexico. The very first university to encourage Afro-Mexican people and be focused specifically, or not technology, but to be specifically a resource for them. Yeah, the tides are changing.
Surely. And I see you and what you're doing with I Got Your Black being a part of that change, because these Afro-Mexican immersion experiences that you host also directly impact the communities that you visit. Can you share some examples of how these trips have positively influenced these communities?
I just want to pat myself on the back because it is so easy to not acknowledge these things. In partnership with community, in collaboration with community, we have been able to hire 10 contractors annually. That means there's 10 people we've been able to hire on a quarterly basis. We've been able to generate over, I want to say, minimum $35,000 into the Afro and Indigenous Mexican community. So that number looks like making sure that we are hiring locally, like I said, making sure that the communities that we are going into, we're hiring, like the driver is from the community. The businesses that we go to are exclusively owned by community. Even the hotel that we stay at is owned by someone that's from Pinotepa Nacional. Now, he's not Afro-Mexican, but in the case where we couldn't directly support the Afro-Mexican people, we made sure that it would still stay in local Mexicans' hands. Because I think the thing that I try to tell people with I Got Your Black is, yes, my priority is supporting Black people in every country, but making sure that the funds stay within the community locally is, to me, like just as important. So yeah, that's something that we've been able to do. I'm really proud of it. The stories that we've been able to talk about, the people, all of them, all of the people that have been put in position to be able to share their stories, it's just been a beautiful experience.
And Diva, I just really want to say how much I admire the work that you're doing, especially because the work that we do is so similar in that we are trying to enlighten, inspire, and educate people. And too often, I should say, I hear critiques about those of us who have decided to leave the United States and move to another country. And it's really easy to punch down on Black people who are choosing to exit and call us the new colonizers and the gentrifiers. And it was important for me to have this conversation with you today because I wanted folks to see that not everybody is moving with that spirit of the colonizer. There are those of us who are very intentional about being conscious global citizens who are making a positive mark wherever we land. And so I just want to thank you for being such a shining example of that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. Yeah, without adding too much, I want to say that part of the way we've been able to do that is by having people who share our vision. People always ask me, like, how do the things go with the guests and things like that in terms of guest relations? Honestly, everyone that shows up on the Afro-Mexico experience thus far, or each person, has been someone who's come to learn, been someone who, like, we have these conversations before our trips. That's okay. How do you show up as a thoughtful traveler in this space? And so I think it's really important, whether you're moving somewhere or traveling, to come curious. And as I've been saying a lot lately, be prepared to take your shoes off at the door, learn what that means in this particular space, and then make sure you do that every time.
I love that metaphor, taking your shoes off at the door, because that is a sign of humility and reverence for the space that you're entering. So powerful. I want to talk about now where you are. After a few years of living here, you made the decision to return to the US. What led to that?
I was living in Mexico for nearly 4 years before I came back to the United States. I'm back in Brooklyn, New York, my hometown or city, whatever. Anyway. And for me, it was being closer to family. I needed to be able to just have some like eyes and ears on my dad. I would have phone calls with him and notice that he's getting older, but I can't necessarily see everything. So I wanted to just come and be able to check in on that. Other things are just, I think, like I said, last year was such a challenging year for me that I wanted to get that familiar hug, so to speak, have closer access to my friends and family. For me, this is a temporary return back. I came back at the most crazy time right after the election, but it has actually been more of a positive experience than negative.
On the show, we've been talking about leaving a lot, but we haven't talked a lot about what it's like to return. And the reality is that not everyone who leaves the United States stays gone forever. There are moments where folks feel called and pulled back to their homes because of aging parents or other reasons, just to be closer to friends and family and to have, like you mentioned, that familiar hugs. I want to know, what has been the biggest adjustment that you've had to make since you've been back?
The biggest adjustment. I think it's the way that people engage on a day-to-day basis in terms of community. Like when I got to Coyantes particularly, I remember people showing up and just offering me a fruit. Or somebody even was like, hey, this is the way I like me. He was like, I'm going to bring you a whole box of papaya. You like papaya? I'm going to bring you the whole box. Like,
not just one, but the whole box.
Listen, I got you. What you want? Like just random coconuts. And I was always very grateful. Or like, for instance, this time where me and my friend Maida missed the last bus back to Coyantes, and we like was looking around and saw a friend and they gave us a ride back. Or if I was going into town and needed a ride and they was like, hey, you don't got to get on the I don't know, like the bus essentially. Just come with us. I'll leave you over here. Like that is something that I do miss in terms of just like people looking out for each other. It is something that like, I think that it's just so uniquely in terms of just like how community oriented people are. Like we shared meals. I would get up every morning and like my house was attached, like the roof was close to another roof. And so I just cross over to the next roof and go have my morning tea, or I put them on to, what do they say? Like, tostones in Spanish. Tostones. We call it patacones.
Oh, see, I love tostones.
Like they didn't eat the tostones like that, but the cheese that they make over there. So it was just like a sharing that I think I really miss. And then sticker shock, just to be honest with you, like that coming back, I live in the most expensive city, probably in the world, New York. And just like going from a place where it's not like I went from ply it's going up in price over time and things like that. Definitely is more expensive. But in Coyantes, I was in a rural town. So things cost rural prices. It was cheaper for me being a foreigner, not to say that it was reasonable for the people that are from there, but it was a lot cheaper for me. And so to come and be back into this place where I don't necessarily have the same privileges in terms of my American dollar valuing more, that was a real welcome home. Hey, it eggs for $12.99.
Yeah, welcome back. I'm sure you didn't expect.
Yeah, or like even seeing the building next to me, next door to my apartment, there's a new building that is used to be a house there, and now it's, I don't know, it's probably an 80 apartment building. So just like seeing all of those changing, New York is not going to stop for anybody.
I often feel the same way when I go back to Atlanta. I'm in shock about just how much has been developed and how quickly it has happened. So, Diva, let's talk about this Blaxit movement, because with the Trump 2.0 administration, I'm sure that you've been seeing and hearing about so many people who are contemplating making a move or actually are about that life and planning a move. And as someone who has already done so, you've gone to great lengths to do it mindfully. What excites you about the momentum around this migration movement? And at the same time, what concerns you?
Yeah, so exciting. People know that they have an option. I think like for so long, the American dream was like the best thing that you could have in life. You move here or you live it, whether you're from not from here, you move to the United States and you get your house with the picket fence. And I think my mom told me like she really thought the streets were paved with gold. Like that was a real thing.
You're not the first person to tell me that their parents or grandparents really thought that the streets were like it was heaven.
Yes, because come on. I think that people see that they have an option, that they can have their dream that they design elsewhere. I think that's a beautiful thing. The things that concern me are what we talked about earlier, which is just like people bringing that colonizer attitude into other spaces. While I don't believe that people of African descent can be colonizers, because I simply don't think that there is enough power or resources for us to do so, I do think that we can have an attitude that will essentially replicate that behavior on a more interpersonal level. I've been seeing something going around about some travelers who maybe haven't been as humble in their like expatriation or and moving to Mexico and really getting a lot of flack for it. And I think to some degree, a lot of it is really understandable because these are people's homes. As I always tell people, whether it's like someone traveling to Mexico on a trip or not, understand that when you're going to a space, you are going to someone's home, period. You need to show, like, you don't go to people's houses and smelling funky. Like, you go there, you clean, and you bring a gift. If we're going to be honest, usually you're big.
Right. Don't listen. Weren't we raised? At least I think good home training tells you that you don't come to somebody's house empty handed, especially not the first time.
Yes, exactly. As my mom said, don't go with your long hair. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that concerns me. Like, for me, I think people don't necessarily see a lot of examples of what it's like to thoughtfully and mindfully move to a place or even travel to a place. And so, for me, that's actually one of the things that I want to teach people through my content, hopefully through a guide at some point. But I really want people to know that, yes, you can replicate these behaviors. You can contribute to gentrification. I absolutely think that without a question, causation is one thing, gentrification is another. But we absolutely can be a part of why housing prices go up in a place, why the cost of a certain restaurant might be double the next time you go back. We absolutely can be a part of that. And so just being really intentional about doing less damage in the pursuit of your dream.
Right. Yes. And that's why it's so important for me to share these conversations on Black Expat Stories, because that is one of our values, is to really help people understand how they can become better, conscious global citizens. For those who are considering leaving the US, outside of really thinking critically about our privilege and about how we can or should not contribute to the gentrification of some of these up and coming areas. What else should folks be thinking about before they make that big leap?
I think knowing your why. It's okay if you want to move to a place because maybe like in Brooklyn, the idea of owning a home feels very elusive to me versus being able to own a place in like where my family's from and Panama doesn't. I think that's okay for you to name that. But I think maybe you're looking for a level of peace that you may not be able to have here, maybe as a result of the political climate or family issues or whatever. But knowing your why is super important. Having those things at center and being really clear about them, and then understand how can your why affect the people that are already there, and then making sure that you make adjustments based on that. Because sometimes we do stuff and it's only selfish. And being selfish is not always wrong. But figure out the balance, because there is a balance to strike there.
Absolutely. And I believe that I Got Your Black is one of those platforms that continues to empower people with the tools to understand how they can strike that balance, whether they're traveling casually or whether they're looking to relocate to another place. For those who are considering making a move back to the States, or sometimes circumstances make it such that we have to, what advice or insight could you give them based on your own experience of going back home?
That sense of community in Goyandas is something I never want to lose. And being okay with being an odd one out. Like, I'm not telling you to go and be super like giving fruits to everybody on the tree. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is being able to extend that to family and friends and show some of that good that you learned in a place, whatever that may be, sharing that with others and not letting yourself just go revert right back into some of the more negative quality. Because like sometimes, like I always tell people, I did move from New York for multiple reasons, but part of it was the political climate. That said, I still think New York is one of the greatest cities in the world. And I'm going to let you know that. I'm from Brooklyn and it's great.
I have never met somebody from New York City who will deny that. Every New Yorker I know believes that New York City is one of the best cities in the world. And I think that's so endearing because not everybody feels that way about where they're from.
I think I'm really lucky in that I was coming back to a place that I really love. Like I was able to go see like a James Baldwin exhibit recently and go to this Black-owned space we could in for brunch and things like that. So those are things that I really appreciate. I think that's another advice I would give. What are the things that you love about your city? Whether it's the people or spaces, definitely tap back into that immediately because that is going to maybe, if your return isn't necessarily because you wanted to, it's going to soften some of that like blow, for lack of better words. For me, it's honestly been really nice to just go to first Saturdays at the museum and things like that in Brooklyn Museum and see all these Black people getting together, having a great time. And so I think definitely not being afraid to be an odd one out and maintaining some of those values that you got from abroad, but also rediscovering the things you love in your own city.
That's some great perspective. Diva, this has been such an incredible conversation and so enlightening. And before we go, where can people follow your work and how can they learn more about those Afro-Mexican immersion experiences that you offer?
I got your Black _ on Instagram and I got your Black on TikTok. If you go to my Instagram or my TikTok, you can go ahead and just click that link and it will take you to details about the Afro-Mexico experience.
Thanks so much for sharing your journey with us today. And I believe that, again, you're paving the way for more intentional, connected, and impactful Black-focused travel. And I cannot wait to see what's next for you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for listening and watching as we continue exploring the journeys of Black expats finding freedom, healing, and belonging across the globe. Are you feeling inspired to embark on your own expat journey? Hit subscribe to join the conversation and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Black Expat Stories for sneak peeks and more expat insights. Now, if these conversations resonate and you want to help this platform grow, then I encourage you to become a friend of the show. Not only will you enjoy early ad-free access to new episodes, exclusive bonus content, and behind-the-scenes glimpses, you'll also be supporting our mission to amplify the voices of the pioneers at the vanguard of the next great migration. Just head to blackexpatstories.com/support to join our growing community. However you choose to connect, keep your passport ready and your dreams without borders. Until next time, I wish you peace, love, and passport stamps.